Okay, we're on Jewish history, and luckily for you, Joel, we are in the United States. Okay? Now, at the turn of the century, okay, 1900s, there was a massive wave of Jewish immigration to the U.S., mostly from Eastern Europe and Russia. Within a few decades, this great migration turned into the great census of world Jewry. So by 1924, you have 4 million Jews in the U.S. Now, I want to think about that. 1924, 4 million. Today, there's only 6 million. 6, 7 million, that's all there is. Okay? It's an amazing thing. We didn't grow. Okay? The other thing I want you to remember, and they don't really bring this up here, is before this, we had already dealt with the wave of Jewish immigration from the Germanic periods. So we've had Jews in this country since the beginning. From what's his name? Columbus. Remember the first guy, the interpreter came over with him. Okay, so he was Jewish. We've had Jewish communities. Again, no rabbis. Baruch Hashem, thank God the rabbis were staying in Europe. The Jews were on their own here, and everybody's having a good old time. Okay, parties every day. It's like college, okay. And so, what happened was, those Jews who were very, very assimilated into American culture, extremely assimilated. Remember, they're coming from Germany, which was the heart of reform. And so they came over here, and without any rabbis to guide them, they no longer kept Shabbos. They were eating non-kosher. It was an unbelievable, what we call, again, a hefgovel, a ownerless world as far as the Jewish community was concerned. So now you have these people coming from Eastern Europe and Russia who never heard of reform. Okay? They heard of socialism, they've heard of other things, but they never had this concept of reform. And they're coming over with their clothing and their beards and their customs and everything else. And who do you go to for work when you come to town? Your landsman. You come to the guy you know. Okay, so I go to my Jewish neighbors who run businesses, and I figure they'll understand about Shabbos, they'll understand about kosher, and it didn't work out. It didn't work out that way. Okay, as we're going to see. But it's really, that's what we have to keep that in mind. Okay, so it was, when they're coming over, it was a difficult journey. They had to, they would normally go to New York Harbor, and so they see Lady Liberty, and then they get to Ellis Island. They had to go through all of the medical exams, and if you failed the medical exam, then you were kicked out. Put back on the boat, go back home where you came from. You can't come into the country. So that would mean that some people had no interest to go back. So they would either kill themselves or something on that idea. Okay? In order to come into the country, you had to have a sponsor. You couldn't just come in. Okay? You had to have a relative or a friend who had already settled here and could vouch that this new person would not be a public burden. Remember, this is 1900s. I mean, we don't even do this today.
That would be good if we did it today.
We don't check it out today. We say, come on in, or come in illegal, and we'll make you legal in a couple of years. Whatever the case is going to be. We'll have some legislation. But here we have these Jews who are trying to run away because they're being murdered, because of the pogroms, all these that the world's against them in so many different manners, and they're just trying to get out. And so when they come here, after all that, and again, they have no money because they're escaping. When you escape, the government doesn't let you go out with all your money. When they were leaving, they would take a suitcase. Okay?
Eastern Europe, they didn't have money anyway.
Right, I'm saying, but they were living the pale. So they had nothing. But regardless, even if they did have money, they had to leave it all. That's why when the Germans, when they were leaving, I think they got a suitcase. That's all you get. You have to leave everything else behind. That's what my father told me, when you always keep your deeds. Leave everything else. Because when the war's over, you have to pay reparations. My father's coming from Germany. That's why he had that sort of mentality. Who would have that mentality today? To save your deeds. save your bills, and they have to pay you. No, but it's true. If you have that, you can leave everything else behind. You don't have to worry about it. You're going to lose some money, granted, but ultimately you have to pay. But that was how they were brought up. Okay? So from Ellis Island, the vast majority of Jews went to the Lower East Side. To this very day, it is still a Jewish section of the Lower East Side. Most Jews, but that's where all the immigrants are going. Let's understand that. All the immigrants who end up there, Jewish immigrants amongst them. As we become more affluent, we leave the Lower East Side. But still, there's a place for the artists and the immigrants. They all started out in that sort of place. Now, when you get to there, so how many people live in a tenement? You have the people living in tenements, so you have 7 or 8 people in a 3-bedroom apartment. That's families, by the way. Families who all live together. Okay? So you have some people living, you have some Jews eking out a living through peddling, but the majority apparently worked in the sweatshops of the garment industry. Now, if this was going to bring some people to attention here, you have the Triangle Shirtwaist factory. You've heard of this? No? Really? But this is famous. Okay.
Yeah.
So you have the sweat. What happened here in the on March 24th, 1911? There's 20 minutes before closing. 164 people, most of them young Jewish women, died because the Jewish owners they owned it. They had insisted on locking all but the front exit. So when the fire blocked the main door, the women were trapped. So some people jumped from the top stories. Others piled against the locked exits. But what happened after this fire? This is the beginning of the labor reforms, the labor unions. Okay, people were working. They were eking out a living. It was landsman shops. They were working for what they thought were their friends, their neighbors. Okay, and it didn't work out. There was no labor rules back then, so I could work for all these crazy hours and for nothing. And on top of that, if I didn't want to work those hours, what would happen? You're fired. Next. Okay, it's like when you go to any of these places where you have all these unemployed workers. On TV, you see it sometimes with the Mexicans in the movies, where they say, "Okay, who wants to work today? Who wants to work today?" Blah, 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 and I'll pay you $2. Crazy, $2, but that's what they would pay. Okay, so here is what they were paying their these Jewish women horrible pay, and they were working crazy hours. There was one there's a famous story that goes with this, by the way. There was one woman who came over from Europe, and she was told by her parents, "You can never break Shabbos. Shabbos is you have to keep Shabbos." So she went to live with her uncle. You heard this story, yeah. And she went to live with her uncle, and so she was working, and he told her, "Look, you're gonna have to work on Shabbos. You have to work Shabbos. That's what it's America. Horrible way what it is, but you have to work on the Sabbath." Very well. So, but she remembered what her parents said. She can't work on the Shabbos, so she worked, and Friday and Saturday she skipped work. And she said, they comes on Sunday to work. They say, "Where were you?" "I didn't feel good. I was sick. I'm sorry. I wouldn't let it happen again. Hopefully." So again, next week, something else. So they realized, okay, they said to her, third week, they said, "If you don't come on Saturday, don't come on Sunday. You're fired." She comes to Saturday. So Friday night, she's wondering what we're going to do. Comes to Saturday. She said, "My mother and my parents told me I can't work Shabbos." So she doesn't go to work. She goes to the park, sits at the park, feeds the birds the whole day. She doesn't want to be at the uncle's house because the uncle's also trying to give her grief about this. You have to go to work to make money. So she says, okay. So she goes and she comes in that night after Shabbos, and the uncle looks at her and says, "Thank God you're alive! What happened? How did you get out of the fire?" She was working for the Triangle Shirtwaist factory, and that's the day that it went up. And she was saved because of Shabbos. Okay? So that's one of the famous stories that goes with that. But nonetheless, that is the sad part is 164 people did die. The only good thing that came out of that, if you can call it good, is that there was a union, the recognition of that a unionized effort would have to come out of this. Okay. So, although there was no overt official government anti-Semitism, nevertheless, it was very hard to be a religious Jew or an observant Jew keeping Shabbos in America. So, many people came here, many Jews came, with the intention of throwing their Judaism away. Okay? New place, new time. In their eyes, Judaism was from the old world, and all it meant was they would be impoverished, they would be persecuted, and it was like, leave me alone. I want a new start. Okay, really, and I can't blame. Nobody can blame them. They were coming over from living literally. I mean, they were called in Luftmenschen. People who live off the ear. There was nothing. They should have died in the pail. Okay, they had no means of support, and yet they were staying alive. So it was like, we're through with this. We want to be in a country that doesn't look at us as Jews, and that by the 1900s it wasn't overtly doing that. We could, if we would assimilate, we could be rich, like the people who own the sweatshops. We could do that sort of thing, and we could do a lot of things. Nobody has to know. So all it means is we have to shave our beards, if you're a man. Hopefully women don't have to shave their beards. Yeah. We have to shave our beards, change our clothes, dress like this. I look like a regular guy out on the street. Okay? Wear a ski cap, okay? Or a baseball cap if I want to wear a cap at all. Or just go bareheaded. Don't worry about kosher. Leave it all alone. Forget it. It only gave us grief. We're not interested anymore. Okay? That's the attitude that they're walking into this country with. They just want to be left alone. That's some of them, not everybody. But that's a large majority of Jews who are coming in. We're tired. Okay. So what happened? We also had that philosophy was advanced with left-wing Yiddish newspapers, because what we didn't give up was our Yiddish. God forbid. Okay. So you had the Jewish Daily Forward, which was socialist in orientation. The worker must rise. Blah 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 blah. Okay. Okay. It's all for the workers. So even for those who did not wish to discard their heritage, still, like I said, it was very hard. There was so much ignorance of Judaism, since now one had to observe on one's hand and on one's own, and not to an organized community. In other words, if I have a community, if I live in South Bend, Indiana, on the south side, right here, okay, where we have an Orthodox community, where there's services every day, 3 times a day, where there is learning Torah, all day, okay? Where I have people I can ask questions to, where we have a kosher restaurant. We have a lot of stuff on the south side, okay? If I go into Martin's supermarket, or Myers supermarket, or Walmart, or any one of these places, half of the food in those stores are kosher.
Packages.
That's right, packages. Half those things kosher. That's most non-Jews are eating kosher today. That's how strong it is in this country. It's so easy to be a Jew. Okay? On the other hand, if I go to a place like New Carlisle, I guess that's Osceola, okay? I may find something kosher there. Sure I will in the supermarket. Again, supermarkets I'll find kosher. But there's no other Jews there. Well, maybe 1 or 2. But for the most part, there's not a community there. So I no longer have a minyan to go to. I don't have a synagogue to go to. I'm not learning with anybody unless I go to line, midwesttorah.org, or I go to Rabbi Neville at YouTube. Okay? Or the other one, Esher Torah. There's nothing there. So I'm on my own. It's very hard when you're on your own to maintain the excitement of it. And what are you doing Shabbos? You're all alone again. So that was very hard. Like I said, and when in those days, you couldn't get kosher food that easily. The OU wasn't out there. We have over 1,000 kosher symbols out there today.
Wow.
Okay, the market is ripe for kosher. People understand that kosher is a marketable thing. But in those days, there was no such thing. I looked at the ingredients and I said, no pork, great. All set, okay? Tremendous. But that's how it was. And of course, in those days, there wasn't as many chemicals as there were today, too, so yeah, it went back and forth. Okay, there are also people struggling to earn a living. And so, like I said, if you said, I can't work on Saturday, not going to work on Saturday, something like that. If I said, I'm not going to do that, so the employer, it doesn't have to be Jewish, it could be McDonald's, would say, well, then I can't hire you. And McDonald's will say that to you. If you're not going to work the weekends, I can't hire you. I'll give you off Monday, I'll give you off Tuesday, I don't care. But you need to work Saturday and Sunday. That's the way it is. So if you're a Christian, who's a religious Christian, you also have a problem, by the way. I don't know if McDonald's still has that policy. I know that in the 70s and 80s they had that. A lot of kids who were religious couldn't get it. I'm talking about religious Christians. I'm not talking about Jews. Jews have a different problem with McDonald's. But when it comes to Dunkin' Donuts or Krispy Kreme, Krispy Kreme here is kosher too. That's on the north side, right? That's Great Road is the north side.
Yeah, Mission.
Fine. So the north side has something too. Good. If you want for the kosher, there's people down there. They also have something. But it's but I can imagine that I know that there's a kosher Krispy Kreme. Okay, if I go to Chicago, a kosher Dunkin' Donuts, whatever I like. Okay, but that's something that wasn't there originally. The kosher restaurants were unheard of. You wouldn't have had them. Okay, so that's what made it so hard to be Jewish in this country. It wasn't an act of anti-Semitism. It was the marketplace. And if you want to ever see, when you tell me convert or die, why didn't I convert?
People don't like to be forced to do so.
That's one thing.
And
What's
you
the other thing? What's the other thing though? The other thing is, even if I convert, you still consider me Jewish. Thus, I get the Inquisition. Okay? Think about that. The people converted, and so what happened? They have an Inquisition. You're looking, do I do anything strange? Because you still consider me the Jew. So they saw it was a waste of time. So here also, if it would have been convert or die, no. Freedom or die? Freedom or Judaism? Wow, financial security or Judaism? Well, the choice is mine. It's a whole different thing. I'm not converting. You're not looking for me to go to church anymore. You're not looking for me to change my religious views. You can be Jewish all you want, and you can make as much as you want, but if you're going to be a crazy observance, the marketplace isn't the place for you, and you won't make it. You'll have to be some low line job, garbage man. Even garbage man has to work Saturday, actually. I can't pick a garbage man. But any low level job where you could maybe potentially get out of working Shabbos, but even there, like I said, you have to work. So they were really in a no-win situation. There were not government programs that said, you come to this country, we will support you. Social Security wasn't there yet. Okay, we didn't have those programs. There was no food stamps. There was nothing. And not that we should give immigrants food stamps anyway. They said, well, we don't need them to come and to get our benefits. But there wasn't that. So if you didn't do it, if you weren't willing to work on Shabbos or figure out how to do that, you're going to starve. Really, that's why it was so hard. Again, it wasn't the government forcing it, it was the marketplace. Okay.
That still happens today, too. Certain positions.
Yeah, like I said, until the 80s, I know that a job in McDonald's, you had to work the weekend. You had to work the weekend. Because that's their busy time. Everybody's off from school. Why not? Okay. So again, for many in the New World, the Old World Judaism could not be maintained. So consequently, here what happens here, now we have shuls popping up. By the way, the 1800s we didn't have shuls. But then they brought the rabbis in. Around the early 1900s, late 1800s, they started bringing the rabbis in. So first the Reform, then and so on and so forth. Then the Orthodox should come in. But, so now they have synagogues coming up. So I want to connect. I'm still Jewish. I want to connect with my brethren there. So there's a synagogue in town. Why not? We'll join them, and we can still be. So that way we're good Jews because we belong to the synagogue. And then we can still break Shabbos. So no problem. Okay, we don't have to follow the rules as long as we join. So so it's not that they had a philosophical. And this, by the way, if you come on this Sunday, you'll hear this part again. They weren't disagreeing on a philosophical part with Judaism. They didn't argue on theology. They didn't argue on anything. What they said was, it has to fit my life. That's all they're arguing. They weren't arguing, did God write the Torah? Didn't God write the Torah? Is there a God? There was nowhere in their conversation. They agreed that God gave the Torah. They agreed that the whole thing was that there is a God. That wasn't part of it. Okay, it's just a matter of I want to be part of a community. So, but I also have to work Shabbos. I also can't keep kosher because it's inconvenient. Whatever the case is going to be, that's what it was. Okay, so so that's why they would join shuls, but they would also join shuls that fed into that thinking. Okay, so you have the Reform movement. They had a nice stronghold within this community, but they went too far with their reforms. Like we said, they had a shrimp dinner, seafood dinner at their graduation ceremonies for the rabbis, and that's no good because that's not kosher. And so people are saying that's too far, even though we may do it. That's the whole. The rabbi has to be Jewish, sort of thing, you know. The rabbi has to put on tefillin, has to keep Shabbos. The rabbi, not me. I don't get paid for that. The rabbi's a professional Jew. If you're going to put a guy out that doesn't keep kosher and that flouts it, we can't be part of that. That's not Judaism. That's how people are. Okay, I know that for a fact because I remember that there was a rabbi who went to a non-kosher pizza store. Okay. And the person is telling me, hey, they couldn't believe that their conservative rabbi, that their conservative rabbi went and had pizza in Papagino's, okay, in Boston, Papagino's. And I said, I got to ask you a question, because I knew what the answer was. I have to ask you a question. How did you see that? Well, because I was there. You were in Papagino's, right? Yeah. What were you doing in Papagino's? Just watching the rabbi? No, I was having pizza. I said, do you hear yourself? It's good for you, but not good for him. How do you know he had it? You gotta watch him eat it. Okay. Did you have pepperoni with your pizza? But they don't hear that. Okay. The rabbi has to be the rabbi. So when the movement did what they did, and they had all their the Pittsburgh platform and so on and so forth. Again, if you come on Sunday, you'll not that much you would hear about it, but they when you hear their platform, so. People said this is too far. We don't want that. And out of that, like we learned, came conservative Judaism. Conservative Judaism didn't disagree where the Torah came from, the clergy. They said that God didn't write the Torah. That was not a problem to them. But they said we have to be more traditional. Okay? So that's where you get the Jewish Theological Seminary. It was what really changed them was Dr. Solomon Schechter. He became the president in 1902. And what he did was he brought a faculty of outstanding scholars. What does that mean is they were trained in Europe. They knew how to understand the Talmud. And yet, because there was the concept of orthodoxy being dead and not reviving itself, so that's how they would get these people to come in, and they would start to teach what he called historical approach to Judaism. Okay. So Solomon Schechter was not saying don't be religious. He said it's a different approach to the Torah. We can understand the Torah in different manners. But he was never saying that you can just make a change. As a matter of fact, he said that changes should not be introduced arbitrarily or deliberately, but through a legislative body. Okay? He wanted traditional type of Judaism that way, and for the most part, it really didn't work. I mean, to this very day, they want to claim that's how they make changes, but it really doesn't work that way either. Okay, some of the famous names that came out of them were Louis Ginsburg. He was known for the Legends of the Jews. Louis Finkelstein. He built the Camp Ramah, the overnight schools, the overnight camps, and then you have Rabbi Dr. Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was a descendant of Hasidic rabbis, okay? And he wrote The Sabbath, Man's Quest for God, God in Search of Man, and so on and so forth. Okay? So then, what happened? The conservative movement had a schism. Everybody thinks it came from Orthodoxy. No. The other thing that came from Orthodoxy was Reform. That's our brainchild. Okay? From that point on, this all breakouts from the Reform. Okay? Reform went too far, conservative went too far to the right. So you have conservative Judaism, Reconstructionist Judaism, which was brought into light by Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan. Mordechai Kaplan had Orthodox training. He was a graduate of Yeshiva University, by the way. Okay? It's important to know. These guys are not, nobody is starting out from their schools, from their thoughts. There's never one of the graduates. We're having people who are always brought up in the Orthodox world and leaving for whatever reason. Okay? So Mordechai Kaplan comes up with his book. He's, what he called it, this Judaism as a civilization. I think that's what the name of it is. He redefines God. He redefines the Jewish people in general. He says that the God is more natural. In other words, God is not omniscient, not omnipotent, and so on and so forth. That the Bible, of course, following the Reform movement, was written by man. He goes so far as to say that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were not grandfather, son, and grandson. Rather, different nomadic tribes who wandered together. The whole story is a fabrication. Okay. Yet, he says that we have to follow, that one should follow Jewish law because that's the civilization. Just like Americans follow the Constitution, so also we should follow our Jewish Constitution. And if you don't, though, no problem. Because that's the way things work. Okay, so there's no punishment if I don't do it. Unlike in America, if I don't follow the Constitution, I can be thrown into jail. If I don't follow the Jewish Constitution, so I'm just not doing something.
Didn't he say that whatever these groups of Jews farm, that they should determine what they're going to follow and what they're not going to follow, and then the community should stick to that? So I read that.
What he did was he made chaboros, which was what we still have that today. We always had that. The Orthodox always had it. And now there's groups of people learning. So he said that each one should. He could have said it. Yeah. I wouldn't doubt that he could say that each community could decide on their own. He was against clergy. He said we don't need clergy. You all have to learn together, become educated Jews, and make a decision. Okay, it's part of America. Remember, this is all part of America. You have to remember that we're part of our culture. That just as American culture was the individual, and we have individual liberties, that was very much brought into Judaism. And because the rabbis were not here. In Europe, it was the other way. Clergy ran the system. So once clergy run the system, so now clergy can now interpret the rules. And that was the Roman Catholic Church, who really held that strong. Okay, until Luther came along and blew that away, killing a couple people on the way. But he blew that apart. Then you had King, what's his name? King, where they get the...
King James V?
No. He was one of the first Protestants. The first Protestant.
In England,
King Henry. That's one of the Protestants.
Formed the Church of England.
There you go. See, he's another one who, once they started to chip away at the power of the clergy, which is what it was doing, okay, so the Jewish rule will follow suit. Okay? And so here now we're in America, and like I said, the rabbis came in later. They were only brought in by the congregants. Think about that. You're bringing in, you have a bunch of people who are happy with the way they are, but they want legitimacy. I'm being very jaded with this statement. I'll say that openly. But you're bringing in, you already know what you want. So now you bring in somebody to basically verify what you're doing is good. And when the rabbi disagreed, well, you're fired. So now you have to figure out, I can't be that sort of authoritarian. I have to come in and bring you up, as it were. Be a babysitter and bring you up, as some rabbis like to describe it. I hope it's not really that way, but That's what it seems to be sometimes. And then the other side is that we learn sometimes how to negotiate, but still, as long as we are under the thumb of the boards, we have to follow whatever that would be. So Kaplan was saying, forget these guys. We don't need them. You don't need me. He's right. It's putting himself out of a job, by the way. You don't need me. What you need is people who are educated, and that means you. Educate yourself, learn about what's going on, and judge the community. Whatever is necessary. What was his point? You're already independent anyway. What do you need a guy to disagree with or a woman to disagree with? I don't care what you can disagree with. Disagree with yourself. Make it up. Because that's all you're doing. And it's all made up anyway. It would follow his logic beautifully. But he was really given to American culture when he was saying this. Okay? When the reform first came to this country, like I said many times, they were amazed at how much work they had to do to try to bring people back to Judaism. They were shocked. They never imagined that Jews could be that assimilated and that far away from Judaism, which is why they wanted to change. There was one person. It was never accepted. But I shouldn't say it was never accepted on a grandiose level. But one of the rabbis wanted to change Shabbos to Sunday. Why? Because everybody had off. And he said rather they should have one day off and recognize the Sabbath than to do it on Saturday. What's the big deal? Make it that. And then we'll bring them back to Saturday. Of course, once you give people a leniency like that, though, they're never going to go back the other way. Okay. But he didn't, but that's why it wasn't accepted. Okay? People that now reform are coming back somewhat to being a little more traditional. Okay? It's been over the years, but they're doing that, and they're now preaching you have to learn. Because again, they also want an educated populace. But the people are looking at them saying, so learn. Leave me alone. I didn't buy into that. I bought in because I want membership. And when my kid is bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, I'm out of here. That's the biggest problem, you know. There was a joke that they were all dealing with problems of mice in the churches. So the priest said to the rabbi, he said, "Rabbi, do you have mice?" He said, "No, we don't have mice in the synagogue." He said, "Really? How do you do it?" He said, "We bar mitzvah them." So, you know, but that's what it was. At bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, like that for the girls and for the boys. So that would signal the end of the Jewish education. So imagine, at 12, and they equaled it for both males and females. So at age 13, the height of intellectual curiosity, if you will, that's when the kids are no longer learning Judaism. They're off in the secular world, going to wherever schools are going to be. And they never were in a day school situation. They were always in a public school, because that was the American way. Go to public school, everybody's equal, so on and so forth. If you were going to parochial school, you were not. You were a right-wing Christian or a Jewish nut. That's it. Okay. So that was his. By the way, Kaplan was also the first one to bring a bat mitzvah, but everybody saw. Even the Orthodox world, we have some semblance of a bat mitzvah. But he's the one who made it famous to say, just as a man, just as a boy at 13 has a bar mitzvah and celebration, so also the girls should have that. It was not the Reform, and it was not the Conservative. It was the Reconstruction. It's an important thing to know. You would think that
What year was that?
1922.
20? That far back?
Yep. 1922. And who was the first one? His daughter. If you ever want to make a change, you have to have kids. It was for his daughter. Okay, 1922. It was his thing that did it. Okay?
It didn't start in our temple until the 50s.
Where's your temple?
Well, this is Pennsylvania.
Okay. Well, you have to think about this. The first woman rabbi, first one ever, 1970. Sally Present. Reform. Sally Present, the first.
Sally who?
Present. Presend. She was the first. 1970. You have to look and say, to reform. What took you guys so long? Really? It's unbelievable. They're conservative. 1985 was the first. I don't know her name. Shelley, I remember the name. But the conservative, 1985. What took you guys so long? Reconstructions whenever they wanted. I don't know what they did. I don't know what their date is. But they're also not right away. And you have to wonder why. I don't get this. Okay. If I'm not coming from God, I'm just looking for equality, so why shouldn't they go to the job? Okay. And besides the marketplace, which should always be a problem, because they have to first get women to be counted in the minyan. So that's when they do that, then they can then you can have them as a rabbi. So then, what's the use of we need a person. We need a person to be the functionary.
It's almost like the women's suffrage or even segregation equality, even though technically that was a practice, it really wasn't until everybody got comfortable with the idea.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, but it had to go. But when you think about it, reform was in 1800s, and it took till 1970 for her, Sally Peterson, to really make the issue to finally get ordination. It's just amazing to me.
For a long time.
It took it was unbelievable that it would take that long for the reform movement. And then another, like I said, 15 years for the conservatives to catch up. Because they're all from the same. Really all they're the same. So it's, I'm live, so I should be careful with those statements, but the people will, but I don't care what they say, they're coming from the same roots. Historically the same roots. So it's really the same stuff. Then you have also, not to be left out, you have Yeshiva University. That was founded in 1886. So that was the uniqueness of YU, Yeshiva University, is that you could go, that Jewish students could go to a Jewish university and get a regular degree. Okay? So you could learn college subjects and all that stuff. You had a great rabbi, Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, called the Rav. He had this uniqueness in how he taught. He got his PhD from University of Berlin. So now, again, he was educated in the old country, as it were, the old country being Europe, and still is one of the major universities today. You also have today Toro College, Landers College, whatever they call it these days. Okay, and that's a like Yeshiva University where you can get a secular degree and learn Torah at the same time, and they have separate classes for men and for women. You don't all go together, just like Yeshiva University has a men's school and also a women's school, and they're separated by over 100 streets. The boys is on 187 in Amsterdam, and the girls are
university studies.
Say again?
University studies.
Yes, they're all separate. And the girl is 33 on the east side, so you have to get 3 trains. It's crazy to get there. It's insanity. But the only thing that's together is if you have graduate courses, so that you can be together. But undergrad, not together. Okay. So that was American life. Okay, that's American life, where we had a lot of choices. Everything was, we had to really work hard. Like I said, if you want to be Jewish in those days, religiously Jewish, you had to work very different. It was not as easy as it is today. Today it's a cakewalk compared to then. Okay, but in those days it was much harder. Like I said, you could lose a job, you may not get a job based upon your observance. As time goes on, the rabbis are infiltrating the country. Yeah, I'm alive. I love these words. The rabbis do infiltrate the country, and the rabbis do try their best to get the Jews back online. So, we're somewhat successful, but I don't know. History will bear itself out as to how successful we actually are in the end. But it's a game of catch-up. It really is a game of catch-up.
You are telling the truth. I lived it. My grandparents came from Russia.
Right.
Probably in the late 1800s. They had to assimilate.
Right.
He opened a grocery store, not kosher. And then I guess when I was a little boy, and they spoke Yiddish, obviously.
Correct. Yiddish was the language you had to speak. That was the national Bundes, all these things.
I remember the grocery store, and he made millions on the grocery store.
Right.
I went bankrupt, the market crash. But then somewhere when I was a little boy, my grandmother, she lived with us. She even, I guess it was coming back because she brought like a teacher in to teach me Hebrew. But it didn't last too long.
All right.
And sent me to a yeshiva in pre-K for maybe a couple of months.
Well, again,
But then my parents said, "What the hell with that?"
Right.
Public school.
well,
But I did live it,
right. So the parents tried. The grandparents tried to maintain it.
Yeah.
The parents are saying, "Leave me alone. I'm in America."
Right.
Okay, and it doesn't do us any good. We don't need it, and we belong to temple, or we belong to shul. We're members. Don't worry, Mom. We're still part of the group. We're only going to marry Jews. Blah 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 blah.
And it was,
It was all a joke.
heavy anti-Semitism.
It wasn't overt. It wasn't overt anti-Semitism.
Yeah, it was overt.
No, you had some kids, but governmentally, it was very quiet.
So I had a teacher that, because I was...
No, wait, that's individuals. What I'm saying, governmentally, there was no prejudice against us. Governmentally, we were safe. You had to deal with every time we have to deal with some idiot who says you killed Christ or blah 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 blah. I had a person call me a Christ killer when I was in 8th grade, and I said to him, "You're an idiot. You're just an idiot. Go to your priest, and he'll tell you we didn't do it. The Romans did it." And his priest actually said, "Yeah, he's right. The Jewish guy is right, but he's still guilty." I'm gonna go to hell. Good.
I had to call my mother because I was bad, and then she said, "Oh, your mother was so nice, and she didn't even have an accent."
There you go.
And I didn't know what she meant.
Right.
My mother went nuts.
So let me go on. So now we have back in Russia, again, 1903. So the Kishinev pogrom was another impetus for the Jews to leave Russia as they finally realized that Europe was not a very secure place for them. They took a couple years to figure this. Again, it's really nice to say it's not a good place for me, but if I have no place to run, it's not what we're talking about. So when America starts to open its borders, by the way, not much, but when the borders of America were not wide open, just like they're not today legally. Okay, they certainly weren't then. They were very much closed, and they really weren't interested in saving Jews. That was an unofficial policy. Okay, but that is a story that's well known. When the Jews were trying to get out of Germany and during the Holocaust, the borders were closed. Period.
They were closed here too.
I'm saying the borders. That's my point. The borders here were closed. They did not allow people in. In Britain, they only allowed 1,000 or something in. It was it's a trickle. And they knew what was happening. They knew that we were being murdered. And they didn't care. So this country has an abysmal record. And if anyone wants to see that record, the book is written by David Wyman, not a Jew. David Wyman. I forget, Paper Walls. Okay? He was actually a teacher of mine in UMass Amherst. So I got to hear it from the horse's mouth. But he was, as a Christian, I guess he's Christian, he was very embarrassed by the by the governmental response. And like I said, he wrote a series of books actually. But that was one of them. Paper Walls. Like I said, if anybody wants to do some homework, see what the American response really was. I mean, he gives records, papers, showing and detailing what was going on.
But the overall official story that's taught in public schools is nothing like that.
Correct.
It's we came to save them.
Correct.
But that was never the.
Well, it's not true.
The intent.
They could have bombed Auschwitz. They could have stopped the trains. So much that they could have done, and it was only 12 miles out. You're in a plane. When you're in a plane, 12 miles is nothing. Okay, but they chose not to. And that was, I forget who the president was. Was the president?
Roosevelt.
There you go. Roosevelt. So it wasn't, and everybody thought Roosevelt was our friend. He wasn't our friend. Okay. But it's, like I said, it's not even me saying it. It's a historian saying that. And like I said, it's an interesting book. I'll give him a shout out for that. So then, like I said, so they realized it's not good for them. And so in 1905, you have the infamous Protocols of the Elders of Zion. People have heard of this? Protocols of Design is a book. It was published by the Russian Secret Service agent Sergei Nilus, and it was the protocols were forgery, claiming to be a record of the leaders of the Jewish conspiracy to run the world from behind the scenes. That's right, we're in control! Yay! Doesn't work. Okay. It's the craziest book in history. Here we were supposed to be running the world. We're poor. We're being beaten and killed. I don't think we're doing a great job if we really run the world. Okay, but nonetheless, that was used to inflame the latent anti-Semitism. Not just in Russia, but anywhere that they would read it. As a matter of fact, today it's still read in the Arab countries. Published and read in the Arab countries. Okay? Henry Ford was an infamous anti-Semite who distributed that book. So for everybody who buys a Ford, you're...
Don't bring it in the driveway, right?
Actually, I have so much to loan before. No, he's still right. Okay. So as you might imagine, Protocols of the Elders was, of course, the standard text for the Nazi Reich. Okay, and like I said, in the Arab countries, it's still read. So, as a matter of perspective, it's interesting to note that the infamous publication appeared in the same year, namely 1905, as Albert Einstein first published his special theory of relativity. So, interesting historical fact there. Okay, and now. In Russia, like I said, there wasn't much assimilation to the non-Jewish culture because it wasn't allowed. Russians don't let you. But there was interest in the attraction to other movements such as Zionism, the desire to go to Israel as a national program. That's from Herzl. Okay, that was coming through, and socialism. People viewed communism and socialism developed by Karl Marx as a path to salvation from Russian oppression. What was he claiming? That the workers should arise. What was the expression? Workers
unite.
Workers unite, and we can. We're tired of being subjugated. Arise, and we can run the show. Blah 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 blah. Okay, nice in theory. It doesn't really work. Okay, but it's But the Jews who are being subjugated, they see what's it called, a piece of wood in the ocean, and they want to grab onto it, and it's going to keep them alive, so they grab onto that. Zionism, by the way, why do they hold on to Zionism? How would they like that?
To give them a place of safety?
Right, let's get out of here. Let's go to Israel. We'll go to Israel. We've been praying for Israel anyway, even though they're not religious. We've been praying for that. We know that Zion is a place we can get, we'll be free, and so on and so forth. So let's have our own state. They had a dream. Just like Martin Luther King Jr., they had a dream. He had a dream. They had a dream. Okay. Came to socialism. That was more, I'm living in this country. I want to make it livable. So we can get rid of the czar. Then we'll be all set. So they were willing to look at communism, socialism, whatever you want to call it, or whatever branch they would be. So that's why they're willing to look at that. Because they were really tired of being killed at the whim of the government. Remember, any time that something would come up in the government in Russia, there would be a problem, kill the Jews! Oh, good idea! Boom! It didn't get rid of the problem, but it killed a lot of Jews. So, in 1911, another major incident set off a spree of anti-Semitic pogroms in Russia. What happened was the Baylis trial. And as socialist and anti-Tsarist movements were gaining popularity, the right-wing nationalists needed an enemy whom they could use to unite the people. Baruch Hashem, they had one, and namely the people, the Jewish people. So we had, in 1911, the unfortunate death of a Christian child was an ideal opportunity for the reemergence of blood libel. You weren't here, so I'll tell you, a blood libel means that when a Christian person disappears, or is killed, found dead, so the Christian clergy at that time would say that the Jews killed that person to use that blood to make matzah or something else as part of their ritual, ignoring the fact that we are not allowed to eat blood at all. Anybody who looks at the Bible knows that we're not allowed to eat blood. Can't ingest it, okay? So, but that was a common libel. So here you have in 1911, Okay? We're not in an uncivilized world anymore. We're in pretty civilized revolution. We've gone through it all. And still, you can still sell this concept of blood libel. Imagine that. Okay? Forget that we can do it today in the Arab countries. Which it's just beyond my ability to understand anything. There's so much hatred that you can have for a group that you could actually believe they would kill somebody, use their blood, and make some food from it.
When it goes against everything that they stand for.
Right. That's what you can do. That's what it is. So again, this is the case. In March, the body of a young boy was found in Kiev. And Menachem Mendel Bayless, the local superintendent of a brick kiln, was accused of murdering the child for the sake of using his blood for matzah. Okay? Bayless was jailed for the crime until he was finally found innocent, but the damage of his highly publicized trial was already done. Okay? While the subject of anti-Semitism was most common in Russian, Eastern Europe, it pervaded almost every society, including the U.S. In 1913, Leo Frank was falsely accused of murdering a young girl in Atlanta, Georgia, who was tried, convicted, and sentenced to prison after many appeals. Governor John Slayton, in one of his final acts before leaving office, commuted his death sentence to life in jail to protect him. The governor also had him transferred in the middle of the night to a different prison facility. Nevertheless, on April 16, 1915, a mob broke in and lynched him. And this prompted the creation of the B'nai B'rith Anti-Defamation League. For those who know the Anti-Defamation League, ADL, run by, what's his name? Who's the guy who runs, he's a famous guy, runs the ADL. I forget his name already. Abe Foxman. For those who hear the name Abe Foxman in the news, he is from 1915. From this one event, we became to protect ourselves using an Anti-Defamation League, which would sometimes be used anytime there's anything going on that seems to be discriminatory against us. Abe Foxman will rise to the challenge and yell from the rooftops. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, whatever the case is going to be. Okay, we'll have to stop there.
Okay.